calendar that's printed, every diary that's printed, every book that's been printed, always put Sunday as the first day of the week. So obviously Saturday is the seventh day. We have no problem with this. The Christians who don't believe that, I don't understand. But we all know that Christians are not very good with maths. Whatever math is involved, guaranteed they're going to get the wrong answer. 1 plus 1 plus 1 is always 740 with Christianity. Never means 3. So we'll find that when it comes to the seventh day, of course it means Sunday. But in everybody else's terms, it's Saturday. So there's no way around that. We know for sure that it is Saturday. And when did they keep the Sabbath from? They kept it from the Friday, when the sun went down, until the Saturday, when the sun went down. So that's when the Sabbath was. Sabbath doesn't start on Saturday morning when the sun rises. It starts on Friday, like the Jews have always known it to be. Why am I emphasizing this? Why do I think this is so important? Because some New Testament translators, when they talk about Jesus being dead for 3 days and 3 nights, say, but you guys really, don't you know that it started on the midnight, like it does with our calendar? The day starts on midnight. So if today is the 15th of January, it becomes the 16th of January at midnight. No, it doesn't. So let's look at some of the habits or the health issues that they have. The Seventh-day Adventists are known to be very, very health conscious. Generally speaking, they are anti-tobacco, anti-alcohol, anti-pork. In the 1860s, when the church first began, it was very, very important that health was emphasized over any other issue. Because they are people who are Old Testament followers, because they believe in following the Ten Commandments, it was natural for them also to follow some of the Leviticus laws, the health laws, as found in the book of Leviticus. So the Adventists became known as the messengers of health. That was sort of their nickname. And that's probably, when people revert to Islam from a previous religion, say they come from Jehovah's Witnesses or Catholicism or whatever, even though they become Muslims, you'll find that some of those thoughts and ideas remain. If they come from a Catholic background, they want a very traditional, very staunch Islam. If they come from a full gospel, happy clappy, jump around background, they want a more relaxed Islam. If they come from a Baptist, they want a more Calvinistic Islam. So they'll find the type of Islam that suits them from where they came from. It's almost like the afterburn is still there from where they came from. And it's the same with me. I came from a Seventh-day Adventist Baptist background, and that's still there. The health side is still there. Very health conscious. Very particular what I put into my food, what I eat, how much exercise I do. It's all part of that upbringing. So I don't have to throw everything away. So I've sort of carried the health issue through. But in the Seventh-day Adventism, or in the early days, it was observed over much of the other beliefs. And sometimes some of the ideas were a bit weird. Some of the health issues were weird. For example, Ellen White told people that they mustn't wear any head coverings or wigs because it can actually cause mental disease. So they had some strange beliefs. Some things were fine, some things were very odd. Wigs were forbidden in her theology. So the Adventists were known to be the health messengers, people with this health message. Some of them were founded, some of them were just crazy ideas. So the early church recommended that everyone be a vegetarian. They promoted vegetarianism. And that at least if they cannot be vegetarians, that they need to follow the kosher laws. So if you can't be a vegetarian, must eat kosher. Because in those days they didn't have Christian places, they were kosher mostly. Christianity was very much separate from Islam in the 1800s. There weren't Muslims running around America, even though there were Muslims in America at that time. They weren't as common as we see today. And so the Leviticus laws were something that were emphasized by the early church. Leviticus chapter 11 specifically. Leviticus is their book of law. Not laws of God, laws of man. Health laws, food laws, clothing. What happens when you're pregnant? What happens when a woman is menstruating? What happens when a man is hurt? All those laws are there. So obedience to the law means that they had to abstain from certain things. But in Christianity, most of Christians reject the Leviticus law. They don't follow the laws of Leviticus. So it's only the Seventh-day Adventists and Jehovah's Witnesses that pick and choose of those laws what they want. It's interesting that the Jehovah's Witnesses say that you mustn't have blood, which is found in Leviticus laws, but yet they are allowed to not live kosher lives. The Seventh-day Adventists who follow the Leviticus law are allowed to take blood, but keep the kosher laws. So they pick and choose what they want to follow. If you're going to follow the Leviticus laws, then follow everything in the Leviticus laws. That's how I would understand it anyway. So they would abstain and still abstain from pork or shellfish and other food products that are considered unclean. So the church has a formal teaching against alcohol and tobacco. In fact, if you want to stop smoking, one of the best places to get a course on how to stop smoking are actually found with the Seventh-day Adventists. The most effective program to stop smoking is one that is developed and created by the Seventh-day Adventists. And if you want to stop alcohol, also, they don't have a 12-step program. They have a much easier way of dealing with it. And so they also deal with drug issues and illegal drugs in the same way. Very good programs in place. Remember that they are very involved in medicine and the sciences and things like that. So Adventists also will remain free from drinking things like tea, coffee, and other beverages like well-known colas and well-known, fizzy drinks. They normally don't do that. Other drinks that contain any type of caffeine. So they remain free of those things. Let's take a break. When we get back from the break, we'll continue, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So the Adventists became known as the messengers of health. That was sort of their nickname. And that's probably, when people revert to Islam from a previous religion, say they come from Jehovah's Witnesses or Catholicism or whatever, even though they become Muslims, you'll find that some of those thoughts and ideas remain. If they come from a Catholic background, they want a very traditional, very staunch Islam. If they come from a full gospel, happy clappy, jump around background, they want a more relaxed Islam. If they come from a Baptist, they want a more Calvinistic Islam. So they'll find the type of Islam that suits them from where they came from. It's almost like there's the afterburn is still there from where they came from. And it's the same with me. I came from a Seventh-day Adventist Baptist background, and that's still there. The health side is still there. Very health conscious. Very particular what I put into my food, what I eat, how much exercise I do. It's all part of that upbringing. So I don't have to throw everything away. So I've sort of carried the health issue through. But in the Seventh-day Adventism, or in the early days, it was observed over much of the other beliefs. And sometimes some of the ideas were a bit weird. Some of the health issues were weird. For example, Ellen White told people that they mustn't wear any head coverings or wigs because it can actually cause mental disease. So they had some strange beliefs. Some things were fine, some things were very odd. Wigs were forbidden in her theology. So the Adventists were known to be the health messengers, people with this health message. Some of them were founded, some of them were just crazy ideas. So the early church recommended that everyone be a vegetarian. They promoted vegetarianism. And that at least if they cannot be vegetarians, that they need to follow the kosher laws. So if you can't be a vegetarian, must eat kosher. Because in those days they didn't have Christian places. They were kosher mostly. Christianity was very much separate from Islam in the 1800s. There weren't Muslims running around America. Even though there were Muslims in America at that time. They weren't as common as we see today. And so the Leviticus laws were something that were emphasized by the early church. Leviticus chapter 11 specifically. Leviticus is their book of law. Not laws of God, laws of man. Health laws, food laws, clothing. What happens when you're pregnant? What happens when a woman is menstruating? What happens when a man is hurt? All those laws are there. So obedience to the law means that they had to abstain from certain things. But in Christianity, most of Christians reject the Leviticus law. They don't follow the laws of Leviticus. So you had a question at the back there.
Shaykh, in Quran it is mentioned that the Jews, they believe that Uzair alayhi salam or Ezra is the son of God.
As you have in all different Christian denominations and Jewish denominations, you have those groups that will take others as God. So as there were amongst the Jewish people, there were certain groups who took other gods. We saw this throughout Jewish history. The Jews will tell you this themselves. If you go through Jewish history, you'll see there were a remnant, not the remnant we spoke about before, but there was a remnant that held to true Tawheed. But there was the vast majority that didn't want to listen to the laws of Moses, who didn't want to listen to what Abraham said, who didn't want to listen to the teachings of their prophets. And so when we see these things, we see that happening. We saw that happen at that time, as it is happening to this day. People are following teachings that are outside of what the teachings of proper Judaism teach. If a Muslim followed his teaching properly, we'd find they have a lot more in common. But unfortunately, people like shortcuts. Think that somehow they can make a shortcut, tying strings and doing all sorts of things, that's going to give them a shortcut. There's no shortcut. Hard work is required. Effort is required. But we have a lot more in common than the Christian. Let's get back to this issue of the Seventh-day Adventists and health issues. There are many well-known name brands that the Seventh-day Adventists hold. One of them is one of those breakfast cereals that you have on your table guaranteed in your home. Everyone will have this specific brand, no matter what country you're in. And it's a very well-known, very big brand. That is the Seventh-day Adventist holding. In many, many countries in the world, they have big companies, very well-known companies. I'll tell you the founder of the company and you can figure out what the name brand is. So the man's name, who has one of the founders of the Adventist health movement, his name was John Kellogg. And he was the person who started the main health issues within Seventh-day Adventism and spread it. In the USA, the National Institute of Health is mostly influenced by the Seventh-day Adventists. Most of the information that the National Institute of Health gets its recommendations, ideas, and guidance from are from the Seventh-day Adventists. So they have a huge amount of power. It is said in the those big, very well-known magazines that sit on shelves and have television channels by the same name. One of those big, fancy magazines speaks about how the Seventh-day Adventists are the most powerful religious organization in the world because of their financial and their political clout, the influence they have on politics and decision-making. The fortunate thing about the Seventh-day Adventists is they're not a militant group. So maybe they have influence on politics, maybe they have influence on decision-making, but for us as Muslims, it's not bad news because they're promoting healthy living, they're promoting the law, they're promoting things like that. Does that mean they're not evangelizing the Muslim community? Of course they are, very, very effectively as well. So most of the Adventist movements we find worldwide are very strict on moral ethics and behavior. So they will not be in for same-sex marriages, they're not in for abortion, they're not into the general things that society would think as a taboo. They also disagree with. They believe that you should dress in a modest way. So you'll find most of their women don't wear these little mini skirts and like revealing tops. They will wear a skirt or a dress that goes a couple of centimeters below the knees, if not onto the ankle itself. In my country, most of the Seventh-day Adventists wear up to the ankle or below the ankle. So they're quite long dresses. Same long sleeves, everything. And men are more or less the same. However, that can differ from one place to the next. So modesty is something that is promoted. One of the successful operations within the Seventh-day Adventist movement is something called Pathfinders. Do you know what Scouts is? Like Scouts? The movement of Scouts that became well known throughout the world. You had brownies for the girls, you had Girl Guides, and then for the kids you had Cubs, and then you had Scouts. Well, they have something called Pathfinders, and it's a youth development initiative which gives adventure sports for their children, takes them out whitewater rafting, teaches them how to shoot bows and arrows and all that type of thing, sword crafts, swordsmanship, horse riding, things like that. Very outdoorsy type of things. And this has been very successful. And it's a way to start with the youth from a very, very young age to empower them to be part of a community. And we'll find that in many parts of the world that have actually overtaken the Scout movement. And so you'll find that instead of being called Scouts, they're just called Pathfinders. People say, where are you sending your kids? Oh, we send them to Pathfinders. And Pathfinders is controlled by the Seventh-day Adventists, run by the Seventh-day Adventists, and promotes Seventh-day Adventist theology. So be aware if you're in your area, say, well, it's just Scouts, but it's called Pathfinders. They are influencing your kids in the way of Seventh-day Adventist theology and beliefs. So they're not going to sit there and go, no, but we're not going to push an agenda. They are pushing an agenda. They are pushing the Seventh-day Adventist idea. So the Adventurers is one of the groups that they have in the Pathfinders, which is, again, if you have your local community and it says, send your kids to learn about, adventures or whatever. If you see the term Adventurers, it means it's a Seventh-day Adventist program that's developing between the ages of 6 and 9 years old. Beavers are another group. Beaver group, that is from about the ages of 4 to 5 years old. So be aware of these terms. Beavers, Adventurers, Pathfinders. These are terms that you must be aware of in your own communities, and you know who they are. Little Lambs is another one. Obviously, we're going to pick up on that one because it sounds Christian-y. And that's for like the 3 to 4 to 5 year olds. And then the older group from up to about the age of 16 is called Master Guides. So these are the different groups within the Seventh-day Adventist movement. They have priests and pastors or ministers, but they don't remain in that church for life. You see, many of the churches, you'll find that the priest remains there till the day he dies, or until his retirement day. So he can be a priest there for 20 years, or 30 years, or 40 years, or 5 years, or 6 years, or whatever. In the Seventh-day Adventist church, it is the same as the American election process. He is voted in and he is voted off. So he will serve a term, maybe 1 or 2 terms in that church, 4 years. Then he'll maybe be voted to stay there for another 4 years. Then he must move to another congregation. It's a way of preventing corruption taking place. Very, very good system. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. Make sure you join us again next week where we talk a little bit more about the Adventist movement. So from me, Areeb Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.